السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. لقاء ربما يكون قد تأخر، ولكن واقع أننا بنقدم اللقاء في التوقيت ده يمكن يكون ليه ميزة أكبر لو كنا عملناه من أسبوعين. لقاء مع السيد هانس يورغ هابر، سفير جمهورية ألمانيا الاتحادية بالقاهرة. ممكن البعض يقول لماذا مثل هذا اللقاء لم يتم قبل زيارة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي إلى ألمانيا ولقائه مع السيدة أنجيلا ميركل، ولكن أيضا يقال أن قبل هذه الزيارة كانت هناك زوبعة تدور حول العلاقات بين مصر وألمانيا، لدرجة أن البعض طالب أن تمتنع مصر عن القيام بهذه الزيارة. طالبوا الرئيس المصري ألا يسافر إلى ألمانيا بعد التصريحات التي صدرت عن رئيس البرلمان الألماني، والتي اعتبرها المصريون أنها مسيئة لمصر ومسيئة للرئيس. في أكثر من مناسبة وفي برنامج القاهرة 360 كنت داعما أن يستمر الرئيس في زيارته ولا يلتفت إلى ما قيل، لأن العلاقات لا تحسب على أساس كلمات تصدر من هنا أو هناك، ولكن العلاقات مهمة جدا في فترة محورية بالنسبة لمصر وهي تنطلق إلى الأمام. لذلك أعتقد أن التوقيت، والرأي لحضراتكم طبعا في النهاية، التوقيت هو التوقيت المناسب للقاء مع السيد هانس يورغ هابر، سفير جمهورية ألمانيا الاتحادية بالقاهرة، والذي درس الاقتصاد القومي والرياضيات، عقلية علمية بالتأكيد. التحق بالعمل في سفارات ألمانيا بباريس وموسكو ومانيلا وأنقرة وبيروت. التحق بالسلك الدبلوماسي الأوروبي في بروكسل بين عامي 2011 و2014، ثم أصبح سفيرا لبلاده في مصر من منتصف 2014. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me start by the outcome of the visit that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has made to Germany. How do you see it today, and how do you see it today as compared to how you saw it before it took place?
We've worked very hard for this visit to produce results. It was almost hectic to the last minute. I think we've achieved a lot, but on other fields our expectations were not quite fulfilled. I think this is normal in bilateral relations between two important countries who each have their own interests and their own weight in their region, like Germany and Egypt. The important thing, I think, is that after a period of upheavals and changes in Egypt, we are now back in business. We are in a process of dialogue, including now at the highest level, because there have been other meetings before, including between the President and the Chancellor, for example, in January in Davos. But this afforded the opportunity to talk in detail about all the questions we have about the region, about Egypt's position in the region, and of course about Egyptian domestic policies as well.
You said some aspects or certain aspects were not fulfilled. We know what has been fulfilled because everybody has been talking about them. Mm-hmm. What hasn't been fulfilled in your opinion?
Well, we had hoped for a solution to the very long-standing problem of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation being able to work here in Egypt, and about other related funds and projects within what we call the Transformation Partnership, and from the title you see that this was conceived in basically in 2011. We, on the one hand, we do not quite understand why Germany in so many ways is praised as a pattern of emulation. On the other hand, there is such a lack of trust towards the political foundations, which belong, after all, to the political parties who make up the political system in Germany. The Egyptian side has assured us, and credibly assured us, that they're working hard on a solution. We hoped for this solution to be part of this visit. Alas, this hasn't happened. We'll have to work on, but I'm still positive we will eventually find.
And you consider such organizations to be vital in relations between Germany and Egypt?
Well, in a way, it was the response to the Arab Spring in Egypt, which was something that we admired very much, where we wanted to help to drive it into a more, to promote it in a more organized and regular fashion. So this was the idea behind Transformation Partnership and behind the work of the foundations. And of course, the foundations themselves have worked in Egypt long before 2011, under President Mubarak and his predecessors, basically without so many difficulties.
So, what is it exactly that you wanted to drive or promote? The revolution?
We wanted we wanted Adenauer Foundation to be able to return to Egypt, resume its work here, and for the other the other three political foundations which are active here in Egypt to also work without interference with their Egyptian partners, some of which are in government, others in the civil society.
Okay. Is the government objecting to the German side, or is it objecting to your choice of the Egyptian side?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question.
The Egyptian government, is it objecting to the activities of Adenauer, or is it objecting to your choice of which Egyptian partners to partner with?
I think it's both, basically. But this is not spelled out clearly because there is always a reaction only after some program or some activity has started. So we want just to clarify that these organizations, these foundations, operate within the Egyptian law legally, and want to promote the certain aspects of the stabilization of Egypt after this very turbulent period.
Having said that, I mean, you've been here for almost a year right now in Cairo, right?
Yes.
And so your term is as long as President Sisi's term so far.
Yes, I arrived actually on the day before his election.
So there you go. How do you feel the pulse of the Egyptian people? What are the tools to feel what the Egyptian people really want? Is it the media? Do you go down to the street? Do you depend on reports that come to you?
I mean, we cannot feel the pulse of the depth of the Egyptian people somewhere in Upper Egypt or in parts of Cairo. We depend on the media, we depend on personal contacts with Egyptians, including those who we don't meet in an official function. But I think it is...
Such as what? What does that mean?
Well, for example, taxi drivers.
Okay.
People we meet in the street or in a restaurant. It is difficult to gauge this, but I think it's probably also difficult for the government to exactly know what the people think. But I think one conclusion is clear: the Egyptians want, after this period of turbulence, they want law and order, they want stability, they want a perspective, they have hopes which they want to be met by, including the government, like healthcare, education for their children, care for the old age. These are the most important things.
Which are the most important things for almost every nation in the world. People want that. In addition to afterwards, they come the other.
Which is true. With the difference, of course, that the Egyptians have gone through this period of turbulence, which is I wouldn't say luckily, because I mean it was a great historical event, but which is not, for example, the experience of the Germans.
How was the experience of the Germans?
Well, for the last 60 years, stability.
And how does stability get achieved, except with the help of friends? Could it happen without the help of friends? Germany is a good example.
I think stable institutions, stable rules of the game.
Stable or strict in that case?
Stable and something between strict and lenient, which is liberal, principled, but principled and firm, but flexible in the individual case. Institution building. I think institution building is the key.
President Sisi has spoken many a times of how he admires how the German institutions work, how the German mentality works. I can try and sense that he's talking about how eager Germans are for work, for building their country, for taking matters seriously, and so on and so forth. How do you relate to his statements?
I mean, we are quite flattered by it, and we are asking ourselves whether we are really as good as he thinks. We hope we are. I don't think it's a question of discipline and hardworkingness, because every man will relate to his environment. So you need to grow up in a stable environment where you learn the rules, where you are profiting from complying with the rules. And I think the same could be true for Egypt. It's not a question of national character. I mean, we see certain, for example, certain Egyptian employers, many of them with a strong connection to Germany, where people are just as hardworking as in Germany and just as engaged. And we have the same here in the embassy, for example, in our visa department, where our Egyptian staff are really hardworking and getting things done. So I think it depends on the environment. It's not a question of national character.
And people, as you said, follow the rules.
Yes.
And the rules are the rules set by the people, the government, the parliament,
within organizations, whether they be economic companies, business, society, civil society. It's not only the laws.
So why, in that case, were you, if the reporting is right, were you objecting to the law to regulate riots and demonstrations?
Well, the Egyptians always tell us that this law is modeled on European patterns, and we've looked into it. There's one chief difference. In almost all European countries, you don't have to ask for permission for a demonstration, you just notify the authorities. And if the authorities think that the demonstration is dangerous or will degenerate into rioting or so, then they will ultimately ban it, but this ban is subject to a court decision. And the court applies very strict principles, usually in favor of those who want to demonstrate. So it is in very rare cases, that that there's a ban on demonstrations. I think this is an important difference in principle. There's also an important difference in practice, and that is how demonstrations are handled by the police and afterwards by the courts. I mean, it is difficult for us to understand why somebody has to sit in jail for 10 years after, for example, he snatched a mobile phone from a policeman, which will be very difficult to establish after the fact anyway, what exactly happened. So there's one important, although there are similarities in the protest law with European legislation, there's one very important difference. And there's a difference in the application of the law by the authorities. And this, as you know, is always, 50% of the law, how it's being translated into practice.
Certainly, but I mean, people get mixed up because I tend to read the laws in order to compare, and perhaps, as you said, notification versus permission maybe is part of the difference, but the notification, according to the German laws, for example, they include a notification including number of demonstrators, for example, which...
Approximate, yeah.
An approximate number, which approximate means plus or minus 15%, 20%, because it can't be 100% approximate. So maybe if we focus, while talking, you and I, because I'm for the freedom of the people and the freedom of expression being part of media, that we talk about the application of the law, as you just said, which is 50%, rather than talking about that the law has to be scrapped, and then the government sees no reason why it should be scrapped when it's very much similar to European laws?
I mean, this is, of course, the sovereign decision of the Egyptians, what laws they want to have. But we, of course, compare, and we are asked to compare, just as you did. And we just the other. I mean, there's also a third point which I should maybe mention, and this is that there seems to be an understanding in Egypt that demonstrations are indications of instability, and we think exactly the other way around. We think demonstrations are an expression of a stable society, as long as they take place within the rules, and it's something you need to have. I mean, we have the G7 summit now in Germany with lots of demonstrations, and the police somehow manages to contain them, even if they sometimes degenerate. But and the same is true for what you said about numbers. I mean, if there are larger numbers, then the police tries to cope with it. This is, as I said, it's an established system of rules and institutions,
60 years.
which after this period of turmoil, Egypt does not yet quite have. But we hope it will achieve in the future.
I don't want to consume the valuable time I'm having with you on one topic, because
Yes.
there are so many things I want to be talking to you about, but it's good to get an insight about that, because normally when you talk to the media or the press and they just take a statement from you, it just gives one impression but not the full picture of what you really think. So let me move on to the other thing, because you talked about part of your sources of knowledge is the media. What do you think of Egyptian media? Because Egyptian media lately has not been very kind to you.
That's part of the game. I still speak to a great number of Egyptians who are able to read between the lines and reconstruct what I really meant or said. So I'm not overly worried by that. Quite on the contrary, I see a positive development since I arrived 1 year ago. And by positive, I mean that there is more freedom of criticism, more of a diversity of opinion and comments than there was 1 year ago, when I think most of the papers still towed the line and rallied behind the president. I think it is not against stability in Egypt that you have diversity of opinion. I think it's a good thing. Some of these comments may be erroneous, others may completely hit the point, but the most important thing is that the reader can form his own opinion, and for this he needs a diversity of opinion. And this is, I think, something that's very different now from when I arrived.
How about the diversity in opinion in carrying your statement about the Muslim Brotherhood and why Germany is not, dealing with it as a terrorist group? And you made a statement that carried a diversity of opinions in terms of headlines.
Yeah, well, I've met people who said I was quite right.
You did?
Yes, I did.
About which statement of them, the correct one or the incorrect one?
I mean, what I
correct
actually
one?
said, and I think what provoked most of the ire was, we don't have documentary proof that the Muslim Brothers are involved in terrorism. This is a statement of fact, because we don't have it. It doesn't imply that I think that the Muslim Brotherhood is a completely peaceful organization.
So is this what you said, that you don't have a proof, or did you say the Egyptian government did not provide you with the proof? Because we thought the Egyptian government did not provide you with the proof was the correct statement, but we don't have proof is the wrong statement.
We have asked for such proof in our cooperation, and what we got was not what would hold water before a German court.
So this was your statement.
Yes.
And when it had different interpretations,
well,
was it lost in translation, or what was it?
Well, I didn't follow all the interpretations word by word because my Arabic is too bad to really appreciate it. But I think it was immediately interpreted as a gesture of support for the Muslim Brotherhood, which it was not. I was just stating that we did not have this documentary evidence, and that's it. And the other thing which I wanted to say is that if you fight terrorism, you must know exactly where the terrorism comes from. Mm-hmm. I mean, who is it? Is it international terrorism? Is it homegrown terrorism? Is it controlled by a central organization? Is it spontaneous? All this, I think, we need to know if we are to cooperate, which we are already doing, with Egypt on combating terrorism.
I thought you suspended all forms of terrorism.
No, we are exchanging intelligence. We want to cooperate with Egypt, for example, on jihadi tourism. There's no question about that.
Jihadi terrorism?
Tourism.
Tourism?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You mean foreign fighters traveling from Germany through third countries, including Egypt, into regions of conflict.
Isn't this a little bit selfish that you're thinking in terms of the ones from Europe only because they're going to come back to you and you're not considering the bigger picture of non-tourist terrorists?
Well, I mean, these people do their horrible work in third countries, not in Germany. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to let them leave Germany. So I don't think this is selfish, quite on the contrary. I mean, we could say, let them go, but we are not doing that. We want to keep them in Germany. Is your problem about
not letting them go, or the problem is about having them come back after training?
Both.
And
both.
So it's both?
Yeah.
How about,
I think that's legitimate.
Of course. I mean, I'm not talking about it not being legitimate. I'm just talking about it being it selfish or cooperative.
I think it's cooperative, yeah.
Cooperative.
We are worrying about the stability of Egypt, yes.
Thank you very much. But, I mean, terrorism is not only about who carries a gun. Terrorism is also about who's funding, who's plotting, who's working things out. Are these things taken into account, especially that we know that German intelligence is one of the best in the world? Once again, it's not just like praising you for no reason, but it's a very well-known fact. But, looking at all these networks and how the funding is happening and how money is being transferred, and I know that you have very strict rules in Europe at large about this, but still, if Egyptians have a sense, and I'm not talking about government now, I'm talking about us the people, that we have a sense that something is in the cooking in Europe, why aren't you sending us messages of rest assured we are working on 1, 2, 3, 4 in this respect, because we are friends of the Egyptian people, not the different regimes of the governments?
We are working very seriously on terrorism, and when you work on terrorism in Germany, at the same time you work on the effects that this terrorism may have in other countries. Mm-hmm. I'm not part of the exchange of information for good reasons, because this is among the services. Mm-hmm. So I can't tell you the details. But the fact is that we are very serious in obtaining and providing information on terrorism, because sooner or later we fear that we will be a victim too.
All right. Good point that you just raised, which is the exchange of information. One negative comment that has been made about the German embassy in Cairo, maybe not only during your time, but it was made that the German embassy has not been properly informing the German government and the German media about the reality of what's happening there. I don't have any conclusive evidence about that. I have conclusive evidence that another major Western European embassy was really misinforming the parliament, and this is why the parliament in that country objected to the foreign ministry clearly about being misinformed. But is this true for Germany?
We inform our ministry, and the ministry informs the parliament. We inform our authorities to the best of our knowledge on what we think is going on here. I mean, we are not trying to hide anything. There may be error involved, as always, but we've nothing to hide. We are trying to encourage thinking about Egypt in many directions, not only about security, but also, of course, about political evolution, about its role in a very unstable region, about the value it has for us. We are reporting about everything, but I can't share this with you.
Okay, enough politics. Let's talk some economics, right? Because this is also very important. Do you think on the economic level, the visits and the deals and the agreements were up to the level of your expectation as has been positioned by Egyptian officials and media, or you would have expected more?
No, it was exactly what we expected. I mean, the signature of the big contract with Siemens was, of course, in the focus. And other contracts are not normally signed at official visits, but among the companies here in Egypt or in Germany. So that's only normal. What the message that was sent, I think, is that Siemens is one of the jewels in the crown of German industry, obviously, but not typical for the small and medium enterprise structure that Germany has, and where many companies are active here in Egypt. Others want to get involved, are interested, but they need to know what is the framework. Different from Siemens, they don't have country offices or regional offices who know exactly who is who in Egypt, but they need to have a stable and reliable legal framework. They need to know what is the economic policy, what is the steps that the government wants to take next. And so I think many of the questions in the meeting between the president and the German business were directed at this issue. So I think we need, for us to enhance our economic relations with Egypt, we need follow-on work on the conference of Sharm el-Sheikh, on the investment law, in many fields of activity.
Maybe 10 years ago, I was visiting the office of the head of Siemens in Cairo. And one very interesting little toy I saw was a train. And I asked him, what is this train? And he said, this is my dream. I want to bring back the Orient Express. Mm-hmm. And I want this train that travels all over the Arab world, down to Turkey and so on. Of course, I can't see the dream happening with the political situation in the entire region. But what do you think of this entire map of the Middle East? How it's going to really come? I'm sorry I'm taking you back to politics, but I mean, I'm just going out on trying to get your vision, because you're not simply an ambassador, you're a person with a European experience, international experience that I would like to know.
I think this is quite horrible, because when I talk to some of our older local staff, they've been traveling to Germany overland both ways. I mean, through Syria, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and through the Balkans, as well as through Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and then with the ferry to Italy. Mm-hmm. There's no more landway that is safe to Egypt now. So the railway project, it makes sense within Egypt, but as a regional network, unfortunately, this is not within sight at the moment.
And this collapsing map of the Middle East, I mean, the pieces of the domino are falling one after the other. How do you see that? Is this in the interest of Europe, that this happens this way?
Yeah, I mean, there's always these very popular conspiracy theories that we want it like that. We want to weaken Near Eastern countries, but that's not the case. I mean, the result is that the situation will breed violence, terrorism. This will be exported to Europe. On the other hand, we are a trading nation. We want to have rich partners, stable partners, to which we can export and from which we can import to make money. So I think it's completely nonsensical. We want a stable region, but less than ever, I think we can pretend to have a certain kind of control. It is a fact that you cannot reach Egypt by land anymore, quite unlike what was the case a couple of years ago. I think that's very sad. There's no use in building or conceiving a network of railways nowadays. Egypt has to concentrate on preserving stability at home and possibly expanding it to a neighboring state, but this is an effort that requires more than the powers of Egypt to achieve.
Certainly, this is true, and this is why Egypt has been looking for support from Europe at large, from the United States, from Russia, from any party capable of doing that. But do we see, like Egypt and Europe, like Egypt and Germany, do we see eye to eye in this respect? Like, for example, Libya. I don't think we see eye to eye.
Sometimes maybe we are not talking enough about it. But we definitely think that despite all what has happened, we need a political solution. There's no real alternative to a political solution because it will only exacerbate the civil war that is already going on in Egypt. Egypt maintains that they have prodded the Tobruk government to be more flexible towards a political compromise. I think that is also true. And the UN-led peace process doesn't really register a lot of progress at the moment. We hope for the best. The talks are continuing now in Morocco. So we are not seeing quite eye to eye, but I think we both want stabilization of Libya. This is completely out of the question.
Do you think at one stage Europe or Germany would be sitting on a table with ISIS in Iraq and Syria to discuss the future of the region?
I cannot see that, no.
So how come you can see Europe or Germany sitting with ISIS in Libya?
We are not.
Or Fajr Libya?
Well, first it's the UN. I mean, the UN is leading the political process, and they are talking to Tripoli-based groups, but certainly not to ISIS.
And what's the difference?
That there are groups in Tripoli who envisage a political solution and just want a larger piece of the cake.
But they're both fundamentalists and they're both carrying arms against innocent civilians.
I'm afraid nearly everybody is carrying arms in Libya. But I think you have to distinguish between ISIS, to whom we will certainly never talk, and people who still have or had in the past a political mandate and try to retain as much of it as they can.
But that's, I mean, this sort of mix-up sometimes of views is just like Egyptians don't see when you, for example, have a meeting with Dr. Abdelmenam Abdel Fattouh, for example, and his alliance and being part of the Brotherhood and being part of previous violence and being part of, he was part of the political scene, but at the same time, he has been part of instigation for violence.
But he's broken away from the Muslim Brotherhood, and nothing in our conversation indicated that he would support violence.
And is this enough that somebody would say, I've renounced violence is good enough? That makes him good enough.
He didn't say I renounce. He didn't say I don't advocate, and this is a basis for discussion.
Sure.
If somebody is against violence, yes. I mean,
if he's against violence, or if he says I'm against violence, I mean, a bit of a difference.
I mean, you have to especially as a foreigner, you have to take him at his word and then see whether that is credible or not.
Really?
Yes.
Honestly?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So back to Germany and the president's visit, and I'm not going to ask you for an explanation why Mr. Lammert made his statement, because it's his statement.
Exactly.
And he is a very eloquent person, and he speaks, and he has a very high rhetoric and so on. But does this in any way jeopardize, in your opinion, the visit at any moment? Were you worried?
No, I mean, it's not for me to criticize the president of the parliament, as you said, because we have the division of powers. Of course, in the background, there was the problem that Egypt does not yet have a parliament, although we hope and we believe that the process is now firmly on track, and as the president has said, Egypt will have a parliament before the end of the year. And then there will also be a time for interparliamentary contacts among parliamentarians from both parliaments.
Certainly, but I mean, you were not worried. I mean, things are going to go wrong here. Were you worried? You're not commenting on it.
No. I mean, the invitation was by the Chancellor. The Chancellor made it clear very quickly that she upheld the invitation because it was necessary to establish this dialogue. And this was the centerpiece of the visit, so I was not worried.
All right, so in that case, we've had the visit. The visit managed to thaw some ice, broken some ice, opened a bit of a passageway. How much of the passageway has been opened, do you think? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, you'd say we've achieved how much?
I wouldn't be able to tell you on a scale of 1 to 10, but certainly we are back in business, as I said at the beginning. We are both important states in our own region. These regions are neighboring, so we need to see eye to eye and exchange opinions, even if we don't agree on everything. This is not our goal in the first place. We want to have an honest and sometimes frank exchange, and we see a value in this alone. The one thing that I have to say impressed me about the president is that when he discusses, you can ask him any question, including questions to which other interlocutors would say, you are supporting terrorists, or where are you? He's very calmly making his argument. At the end of it, you may agree or you may still not agree, but the way he argues certainly has made its impression.
Do you have a feeling that public opinion in Germany has changed after this visit?
Public opinion in Germany is still critical because we have lots of news coming out of Egypt, especially what regards human rights and the civil society. These news are also reflected in Egyptian documents like the report of the National Council on Human Rights. I think, of course, public opinion routinely understates the need to be in business even with somebody with whom you don't entirely agree.
And that's Egypt you're talking about?
Well, we agree on many things. We don't agree on other things.
I just meant, you meant Egypt when you said somebody we don't agree with on many things.
On everything, but agree on other things, yes.
What about Egyptian public opinion in your point of view? Is it of importance? Is it something that you take into consideration? Is it an important element, or that will build up or people will forget in time?
No, I mean, of course we want to know what Egyptians really think. It is difficult to gauge if you have the language barrier, if you don't reach all parts of the population, but it is important. What we get back from ordinary Egyptians is normally a lot of respect and affection for Germany, for which we are very grateful. There are very, very many Egyptians who have either been in Germany themselves, who have part of their family in Germany, who have made positive experiences there. But of course, this is not yet an opinion. This is a feeling of friendship for which we are grateful, but it's not an opinion.
In the embassy, I mean, you must have dozens of drivers, cooks, helpers, employees, and if you say, I have 50 people working in the German embassy, and let's take them as a random sample, you must have at a certain stage asked them, what do you think of what's happening in the country? And you must have gotten a feeling of how Egyptians feel and felt in the past year and a half, 2 years. And certainly, I'm not making a judgment, but certainly it's in a way or another contradicts a bit of the general opinion that's being held by you, the embassy, and the German media.
As a matter of fact, we have more Egyptians working in this embassy than Germans. And of course we talk with them. When I arrived 1 year ago, they were still so much under the impression of events, including the 30th of June and 3rd of July, that they didn't really like to talk about it. And
they didn't like to talk about it?
They didn't like to talk about it. I mean, not to discuss it.
Because they thought that you would fire them if they made an opinion?
No. They accepted the result of what had happened unconditionally and didn't want to enter into arguments about that. There were others who disagreed. I would say a relative minority. And we find that, as I think happens in Egyptian society at large, they don't discuss very much with each other, nor with us.
But Egyptians are very open. I mean, visit Facebook. I mean, visit anything. Egyptians are discussing, maybe right now they're discussing other things, not politics, but I mean, since 30th of June 2013, for at least a year and a half, people were engaged in so much discussion.
No, but I'm asking everybody when I have an opportunity to do so what he thinks about it. But our interlocutors are quite reserved at giving us their opinion.
Are Egyptians becoming xenophobic?
Becoming is maybe the wrong word, because there has been long
xenophobic.
No, there has long been a feeling of being controlled by foreigners. This is not a recent thing, I believe. And there is a certain distrust of foreigners, which luckily, as far as I can judge, doesn't act against us Germans. We are not normally accused of trying to undermine Egyptian independence, harm Egypt as much as possible.
No, you're one of the very, very few countries that did not occupy us.
Exactly. We were very lucky in this.
Okay, so having said that, let me take a look. You're coming from the EU background, and I've heard that you're going back to the EU pretty soon. Is that so?
Yeah, that's true.
When are you expecting to do that?
Very soon, in the coming weeks. But let me say something about this. I've worked for the EU before, and then when our present government was formed, many of our high-ranking diplomats left the European External Action Service to join the government, and I was, for other reasons, part of this, and we were left with very few posts in this particular service. So now we want to get back into it. The government asked me to apply for a certain position, and I was selected, and that's why I'm now leaving. I'm actually quite reluctant to do so because I like being here in Cairo. 1 year is certainly not enough to understand Egypt, and there are plenty of projects that we are in the process of doing, but I think the situation would be exactly the same after 3 years or even 4 years.
Would you, is it a secret, or you can tell us what kind of a post you're having at the EU? Or it's still confidential?
It's still confidential because I don't have the agreement of the receiving state yet.
But I mean, definitely, right now we could say that Egypt has a friend within the EU lobbies and corridors and offices.
Certainly somebody who understands it better than others. Let me be modest about it.
But not yet to the level of friends?
Oh, yes, of course.
Friends?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think the UK will just split from the EU?
This is a question. This is very difficult to answer from Cairo. We hope not.
Okay. But I mean, why has it all of a sudden gone up to the level of let's go to a referendum? Is it a part of biting fingers or twisting arms, or what's happening?
I think it's partly a question of British domestic politics. It's partly a question of perceived interference by the European authorities. But if you talk to most of our British partners, they are reluctant to leave the European Union, and certainly we as Germany would be very reluctant to let them go because they are a force for reform. They are one of the most important member states, and they are an important link with the United States, and certainly we would not like to release them from any of these functions.
I've had a recent interview with our common friend, Mr. James Moran, the ambassador of the EU, and we spoke about the EU very openly, but when it came to speaking about the European Parliament, it was a bit difficult for him to say much. Now that you haven't joined the EU yet, maybe I can ask you about the European Parliament, and why is the European Parliament taking a direction not exactly in line with European parliaments? Is the difference of the S that makes that much of a difference?
The European Parliament is elected independently. The composition is different. I think the motives of voters when they vote for parties in the European Parliament are sometimes different from when they vote in their national parliaments. So, I mean, the European Parliament has certainly the right to voice its own.
Of course, it has the right, but I mean, the fact that we see it going in a different. I'm talking about Egypt here. I mean, that's basically what concerns me. What comes out of the European Parliament, it's either led by lack of enough information given to members of Parliament, and probably this is because we don't have a Parliament to communicate with them. But I mean, lack of effort as well in order to learn more. I compare that to the British Parliament, for example, which has a stand, the French Parliament, which has a stand, and somehow part of the German Parliament, which has also a stand of understanding.
I think in each of these parliaments there are people who are well informed about Egypt, which does not automatically make them uncritical sympathizers, but I like to deal with these people because you can argue with them on a basis of a certain knowledge. How this then plays out in the entire parliament is a question of dynamics within this parliament, which is often difficult to judge from outside. I mean, as members of the executive, be it in the EU or be it in Germany, we are summoned to parliament to ask, to answer to questions, which is what we do. We do not really ask how they arrived at these questions, and we are not entitled to do so. We just answer or try to answer their questions. And we always find that some of these questions are very intelligently asked because there are people behind them who know the country in question, be it Egypt or be it any other.
Yeah, I totally agree about the people behind them. Okay, we've just, elections have been concluded in Turkey. Do you think Turkey is going to be an EU member pretty soon?
This process has been going on since the 1960s.
We were all children, yeah.
We were all children. The EU has changed beyond recognition. Turkey has changed beyond recognition. It's still open because it would be the biggest country ever acceding to the European Union. I think in many ways we are moving towards each other, especially in the economic field. In others, not necessarily so. But be it as it may, the interaction between Turkey and the European Union is, in my view, positive for the country.
Positive for Turkey?
Positive for Turkey.
Positive for Europe?
Yes, because it's a big partner. It's the home country of many of our citizens or immigrant.
4 million people, is it the number?
In Germany, the factual figure should be close to that, yes.
And you don't mind that Mr. Erdogan tells you, mind your own business, don't you dare talk about human rights, don't you dare talk about democracy, go take a look at yourselves in the mirror first, or things like that?
It's a complicated picture because in his first years, Erdogan did a lot to promote reforms in this direction in line with European standards. Recently, Europe is not such a beacon for him anymore. But this relationship has gone through a lot of crisis and has survived a lot of crisis. If you only recall Cyprus in 1974, that was much more serious than anything that's happening now.
So human rights and stuff of the sort is not really a major element in the point of view of Europeans?
Of course.
It's not. Of course it's not. Of course it's not.
It is.
Or yes.
It is.
So how come this has not been a milestone that really blocked your way to cooperate with Turkey? I could still see that you're talking pragmatically about relations between...
No, if you look at the mechanics of this, the accession process comprises a number of chapters of taking over European law, and the human rights chapter has not even been opened for negotiation. So it is in fact blocking the accession process.
Okay, I've taken much of your time, but I just want to, of course, leave you a minute to tell me if there's anything I hadn't asked you about. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you would like to tell our Egyptian audience and Arab audience?
Well, I mean, after 1 year of having been in Egypt, I have to say I very much sympathize with Egyptians, and I feel as a friend. I understand their aspirations. I understand that they want to have calmness, that they want to have economic development. I think that's where we can absolutely be partners. I think they have, but this may be difficult at this stage yet, to accept political diversity, to accept competition, as including in the political field, as a way of moving things forward. For us in Germany, demonstrations are a sign of the stability of our country, and I think in the long run that should be the same in Egypt.
Right, and you're still waiting for evidence that the Muslim Brotherhood are a terrorist organization?
We are ready at any time to receive it.
Can I bring you a picture that has 12 people from the media, 15 people from the media, and mine is in the center, and this is the hit list of the Brotherhood? Can I bring you that? Would it help?
Yes, if it would certainly help. But we will look into it, of course.
Certainly. Mr. Ambassador, it's been a pleasure really talking to you. Thank you for answering all my questions, and thank you for being so candid and open. That's a real pleasure, and I would consider that I personally have a friend within the EU, and I will travel and bother you with my questions and seeking interviews with you, no matter what the post is.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. سفير ألمانيا الاتحادية في القاهرة السيد هانس يورغ هابر، وإجابات صريحة على كل الأسئلة. يعني ما سبتش سؤال الحقيقة كنت عايز أسأله وما سألتوش. ما فيش حاجة هو حاول أن هو يبتعد عن الإجابة فيها. أرجو أن تكون الصورة انتقلت صحيحة عن آرائه اللي نقلت خطأ عن طريق الصحافة المصرية، أو زي ما تبين لي أنها لم تنقل خطأ، ولكن كان الخطأ في من فسر ما قاله السفير. ألقاكم بعد الفاصل.